and a ceasefire lets us try to address this humanitarian crisis. Are those two parties seeing that? I don't know. It would seem that they get stuck every time, and it would maybe be helpful. But as a humanitarian, maybe it would be helpful to see the doctor a week ago in tears as he looked at another child with terrible words thinking, what did this child do? Or a woman in tears asking for food. Both parties have an absolute responsibility to the Palestinians, and as one Gazan said to me, we feel like we're being held captive by one group and punished by another for being held captive by the first.
And meanwhile, when it comes to aid getting in, you were there recently, as you said, and we have often covered on this programme the huge difficulties there is getting aid in. What if anything, is getting in at the moment? How difficult is it?
It remains very difficult. Aid is getting in, there is no doubt, and I think there was an announcement yesterday or the day before by authorities of 400 plus trucks getting in. That, of course, is a great day, but that is on the back of an average of 150, a 70% reduction in the amount of aid getting in, in the last 6 months. It's simply not enough, and there's been entire weeks where the north, where it is imminent famine, where I see people, that universal symbol of hand to mouth showing hunger with children who may well not, just a lethal fear, simply not enough, and that is the environment that everyone has to operate in. There's restrictions, there's blockades, there is intent. We must recruit intent. There was a discussion just about really keeping people safe as hostilities continued. We wouldn't see one toilet for 900 people in Rafah, one shower for 3,500 people. We wouldn't see these restrictions on aid. We might see hostilities, but we'd see people at least not being killed on the ground by the lack of water as they happen this time.
James Elder spoke to the children's aid.
It is 26 minutes past 8. Not many scientists have to wait literally decades to have their discoveries borne out. Then again, not many scientists get to leave their name, again, literally, on our understanding of the universe. The Nobel Prize-winning physicist Peter Higgs, whose death was announced yesterday, he was 94, managed just that. It was back in 1964 that Peter Higgs proposed the existence of a new wave or particle, the Higgs boson, that helped bind the universe together by giving particles their mass. But he would have to wait more than 45 years for other scientists to prove his theory. Professor Higgs spoke to our science reporter Tom Fielding back in 2008, explaining how the Higgs boson discovery came about.
Part of the paper, as it had finally appeared, which gave rise to all the fuss about the Higgs boson, was in fact an afterthought. The first version of the paper went to the European Journal of Physical Letters, and it was rejected. It was said afterwards by a colleague of mine who was here at CERN, which was where the editor was, that people in the theory group here didn't understand what I was talking about and didn't see that it was relevant to particle physics. So in the rewriting of that paper, which I then sent across the Atlantic, because I thought maybe the American journals would have referees who were more familiar with what I was doing. And the second version, which was accepted, I listed a few sort of consequences in terms of what would be an experimental signature. And one of those consequences was that there would always be some massive spinless particles in the theory, at least one. And that was the first reference to what's called the Higgs boson. The second version got accepted.
Yes, Professor Peter Higgs' death was announced yesterday. Well, Tara Shears is a particle physicist at the University of Liverpool. Professor John Butterworth is Professor of Physics at UCL, working on the ATLAS experiment at CERN's Large Hadron Collider. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
John, can we talk first of all about the man that has left us? Can you tell us a little bit about what Peter Higgs was like?
Sure. I mean, I didn't know him well, I can say, but I met him several times, and I think everyone who did know him was impressed by his humility and his quietness, and also the way he didn't like the public eye, and yet he felt that he was in an amazing position because he'd made such a breakthrough and his name was in the popular domain in that sense. So he had a duty to speak up for science and to join in the celebration of this amazing discovery of things. So it was always lovely to meet him, and it was always the sense of he's slightly amazed by giving back to the thing he did in the 60s, and not terribly enjoying the publicity, but obviously quite proud of what he done as well. So it was very proud of him.
Tara, when you heard of his passing, is there a moment for you and colleagues?
Well, of course, because Peter Higgs is so central to our whole understanding of particle physics. He's really part of the whole particle physics family, and so of course it gave us all pause. And our thoughts go out to his family and those who knew him best. So, yes, in fact, at the moment, many of us are at an Institute of Physics meeting that covers particle physics. And so, at the end of our talks, one of our colleagues from the University of Edinburgh stood up and announced the death of Peter Higgs and just gave some reminiscences that were absolutely lovely, and finished by saying, so how would Peter like us to remember him? How would he like us to carry on? And then we thought, well, by doing more physics, of course, by exploring this great idea, and that's what we're going to do.
John Butterworth, the Higgs boson isn't found by looking ever more closely, is it? It has to be created to be identified, and that's what happened at CERN, at the Large Hadron Collider, isn't it?
That's correct, yeah. I mean, well, in a sense, it is looking more closely, because as you go up in energy, in quantum mechanics, that gives you more resolution. It's like turning up the power of your microscope, and in that kind of collision, then, you do great exposure. As you say, it's not kind of lying around waiting to be discovered. It's created momentarily in these high-energy collisions. But there is a sense in which those collisions are looking more closely at nature than they've ever done before. And then we uncover the fact that this strange mathematical idea from the early 60s is actually there in nature. It was this amazing vindication, if you like, of these ideas of how really abstruse mathematical ideas seem, as Peter said in that clip there, that their relevance to nature isn't always obvious. And you build this experiment and you see that nature really implements this idea. It uses this mathematics to make nature work.
Tara, can you explain, perhaps to those of us that aren't particle physicists, the scale of his contribution to our understanding of the universe?
Gosh, it's absolutely fundamental. So the Higgs boson that Peter proposed, and the whole mechanism that gives rise to it, is a really integral part of our understanding of the subatomic universe in particle physics. It tells us how fundamental particles that make up all the stuff around us get their mass, how some of the fundamental forces that stick these particles together, how they're connected together. You know, it really is the linking piece that locks together so much of our understanding. And that's why, as John said, that clip that you just played of Peter saying, well, almost as an afterthought, he added the experimental variable. So urgent for us to see whether this particle existed or not, because that was the only way we could verify this extensive and fundamental picture of the universe that Peter's work enabled. So, you know, how big is it for us? Well, without Peter's work and the other theorists who were developing similar approaches at the same time, well, we wouldn't have this understanding. We wouldn't have an understanding of how our world and universe works, of how we have mass, and that leads to how we can understand atoms and chemistry. It's really fundamental.
Tara Shears, Professor John Butterworth, we will leave it there. Thank you very much indeed.
Time is 27 minutes to 9 for the sport report.
Hi Justin, well, football dominates this morning. First leg draws last night for the two English clubs still in the Champions League. Manchester City engaged in a thrilling high-quality match in Madrid with Real. It ended 3-3, and Arsenal taking an early lead at home to Bayern Munich, but then having to come from behind for a 2-2 draw. Surely be right to imagine that City manager Pep Guardiola feels more comfortable about progressing to the semi-finals from the second leg than Arsenal's Mikel Arteta. Domestically, it remains extremely tense at the top of the Championship. Leicester still lead despite losing 1-0 at Millwall. Leeds stays second after drawing 0-0 with Sunderland, but Ipswich, they can overtake them both if they beat Watford tonight. Which takes us to a 2-0 win for England's women in Dublin against the Republic of Ireland, the second match of their European Championships qualifying campaign. After a below-par performance last Friday, in a 1-1 draw with Sweden. For one player in particular, England captain Leah Williamson, this was an emotional return to the side after a year away, recovering from an ACL injury.
The anthems, I struggle with that anyway. Seeing my mum, she came over, which is really nice. When it finished, to be honest, that's the most emotional I was. I wanted to stay in the game and be present, but it's been a journey, so yeah, it's nice feeling.
World football commentator Vicky Sparks was watching. Good morning, Vicky. Perhaps you could start, I guess, by assessing the significance of Williams' return and her performance on the night.
Yes, and what a moment it was for her. You can hear the emotion just in that clip, can't you, in her voice. It has been such a long road back from that ACL injury. She says she feels 10 times taller, 10 times stronger when she plays with the England badge on her shirt. And it was a big play for England to have back last night. She helped them keep a clean sheet that had become all too rare in her absence. And her manager, Serena Wiegman, praised her alertness, her distribution and her winning of some key 1v1 duels last night. A real boost for the Lionesses to have her heading into the rest of this qualifying campaign.
Yeah, so more generally than Vicky, England certainly had improvements to make after last Friday, didn't they?
They did, and I think overall we did see that. It was certainly a deserved win. For much of the match they were dominant. Lauren James put them ahead early on with a low finish. Alex Greenwood doubled the advantage with a penalty before hitting the post with a second spot kick. But with 20 minutes to play, those defensive weaknesses just started to creep in, and Ireland sensed that. They stepped up the pressure. Caitlin Hayes went close twice, so less comfortable than it might have been for England. Still plenty to work on, but in the end, 3 points, a clean sheet, and they moved second in their group to get this defence of their European crown back on track.
And briefly, Vicky, for Williams, a good night overall for the home nations teams, all of them 100% successful.
Indeed, and back-to-back wins now for Wales under new manager Rhian Wilkins. They look to reach their first major tournament. They beat Kosovo 6-0, with Jess Bishop winning her 150th cap. Elsewhere, Northern Ireland went 3-1 away to Bosnia and Herzegovina. Scotland beat Slovakia 1-0. Now, unlike England, the rest of the home nations are in League B, so they can't qualify automatically, but finishing in the top 3 of their groups means they reach the playoffs, and currently they're all in the top 2, so a good start all round.
Okay, Vicky Sparks, thank you. Rory McIlroy's 10th attempt to complete the career Grand Slam at the US Masters at Augusta will take place over the first 2 rounds at least, with the only man higher than him in the world rankings, that's Scotty Scheffler. They and Xander Schauffele will tee off tomorrow in the mid-afternoon our time. Tiger Woods may not have the Masters title in mind, maybe making the cut will be his first priority, but he certainly believes that McIlroy's career Grand Slam is more than possible. It's more.
No question he'll do it at some point. Rory's too talented, too good, and he's going to be playing this event for a very long time. And he'll get it done. Rory will be a great Masters champion one day, and it could be this week. You never know.
And as you may have heard in the news, British Olympic gymnast Max Whitlock has announced that the Paris Games this summer will be his last. He's retiring afterwards as the most successful British gymnast of all time, collecting 14 gold medals across World, European and Commonwealth Championships, plus of course the Olympics.
I've done the sport for 24 years, 31 years old now. I feel like in my gut, and I think you've got to listen to that. Yeah, it's the right time for me, especially after Olympic Games like Tokyo, the previous one, being a COVID Games with no audience. I cannot wait for everyone to be able to come out to Paris and watch. I think it'll be an amazing Olympic experience, but also like I've given myself for the opportunity for when I to watch Olympic Games.
And so to the tips then. Wolverhampton 340, number 7 Conte Patiro, market raising 435, number 6 Off the Jury.
Thanks very much, Rob. It is 23 minutes to 9. Let's hear from Dr. Sian Williams ahead of this morning's edition of Life Changing.
Good morning. Today, a nurse and midwife whose own hospital experience revealed just how flawed and uncaring the system could be. Agnes came to the UK as part of the Windrush generation and used sheer determination and hard work to push through the many barriers and reach the top. But it was her own private and personal loss that inspired her to challenge and change things for others. Agnes's story is remarkable and uplifting. Join us on Life Changing, just after the news at 9.
To the weather, looks nice outside the studio window and indeed in the wider east, but later it won't be. Overcast, windy and wet day right across the UK.
You're listening to Today on Radio 4 with Justin Webb and Johnny Diamond. It's 22 minutes to 9. Let's get a summary of the news from Lisa Costello.
An independent inquiry has criticised services that NHS England used to offer to children questioning their gender identity. The report by Dr. Hilary Cass says there's a lack of research and remarkably weak evidence on medical interventions, such as prescribing drugs to stop the onset of puberty. She also says the toxicity of the debate around gender means professionals have been afraid to openly discuss their views. NHS England says it's already making changes. President Biden has said he believes the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is making a mistake with the way he's conducting the war in Gaza. Mr. Biden said Israel should just agree a ceasefire and allow unfettered access for food and medicine. Tesco has announced a pre-tax profit of nearly £2.3 billion in the year to the end of February. That's an increase of almost 160% on the year before. Assaulting a shop worker is to be made a separate criminal offence in England and Wales. Those found guilty will face a maximum sentence of 6 months in prison or an unlimited fine.
Thanks very much, Liz. Act now. That's the advice of the Environment Agency to people living in flood risk areas, and the rain we have been suffering for the past few months has made things much worse. There are warnings of more floods to come as rivers burst their banks onto already sodden land. The challenge then, flooding from rivers and the coast, and low-level, near constant flooding as a result of heavier rain. Dave Throop is a former area manager for the Environment Agency. He described for us what he could see on a walk along the river in Worcester city centre.
I'm here on the banks of the River Severn, right on the side of the cathedral. Actually, if I look up, I can see the big cathedral towering over the river on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side here is where the riverside paths, very popular with visitors and locals alike. But they're currently under, I don't know, probably a foot of water, 2 foot of water, something like that. It's just beginning to recede now. We're not going to stop this flooding. In fact, it's going to get a lot worse. And all the predictions are on the Severn that we're going to be seeing river levels probably 10% higher than they are. So flood levels 10% higher than they are in the next 10, 20 years. So it's going to get significantly worse, and we can't engineer our way out of this. But yes, people are getting concerned about what's that going to mean to the city going forward. And Worcester is just one case. You could apply this to 100 other side towns up and down the country.
That was Dave Throop on the banks of the River Severn. Barbara Young, Baroness Young, is a Scottish Labour member of the Board, former Chief Executive of the Environment Agency.
Good morning.
The challenge of low-level flooding is not new, but appears to be more extreme now. Is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, we've had our worst wet winter since records were down in 1836. And so the groundwaters are high, we've got saturated earth wherever it is, we've got continued rainfall adding to the problem, and we've got rivers very high as well. So it's a perfect storm, and we will have to recognise that will increasingly be the case with climate change.
We hear about dredging for rivers, and of course coastal defences for the coast. Is there anything that can be done about surface water drainage and getting rid of surface water as it cascades down from the heavens?
I think there's quite a lot can be done that isn't being done. I mean, one of the things we need to do is to get our landscapes far more capable of sopping up water than they are at the moment. That means more what's called nature-based solutions, peatlands in the uplands, trees planted along river courses and in places where surface water flooding happens. They help rainwater to be sucked up as quickly as possible, and also means that the soil holds more water. So there are nature-based solutions. There are things that we can be doing in terms of the way we construct the built environment with more strategic and sustainable drainage solutions, ways of making sure that when we do build houses or other properties and pour more concrete, that we don't actually increase the flood risk, but that we engineer in flood risk management proposals during that. And we can make properties more resilient as well. I mean, raising the electrics so that a small flood doesn't come as a major disaster, more hard surfaces on floors, protecting air bricks, protecting doorways, there's lots and lots of little bits of technology, but all of this needs a sustained plan. And I think the problem at the moment is that the government hasn't really kept its eye on the ball of what we need to do to adapt to climate change as opposed to what we need to do to reduce carbon. And we absolutely have got to get more really behind that.
Is this also about people who perhaps thought that they were not in a danger zone or a challenging area, now being in such an area and having to think a lot harder alongside local authorities and the other agencies involved about what they might do if?
Absolutely. I mean, people need to understand what their flood risk is, and the Environment Agency can help with information about riverine flooding and coastal flooding, and increasingly they're helping with information about groundwater and surface water flooding. But the key responsibility for some of these persistent low-level flooding issues is the local authority. And so we need more resource for local authorities, more expertise at local authority level, to be able to get decent plans for their built areas, try and reduce the risks of surface water flooding and groundwater flooding, and to encourage individuals and local communities to think about what they can do to reduce their risk. So there's a huge amount that needs to be done there, but it will require great effort by local authorities, and they simply haven't got the resource at the moment.
Baroness Young, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
And that brings us to 9:15. There is a rather frightening, or perhaps rather infusing headline across the Financial Times this morning. It is their main...